Welcome to this lesson where we're going to be discussing today actually how to play a game of 40k. So all of the steps that you need to do in order to get you to the point where you start moving some models.
Yep. So this is everything from setting up your table, putting your objective markers down, terrain, army lists, maybe picking secondaries.
Yep.
And of course deploying your army.
Yeah, and there's a real specific order to do this and a few nuances, but what we're also going to do for you is we're going to put a checklist in the description below, and also we've got some pretty cool handouts for you as well, just to make your experience a little bit slicker so that you can maybe avoid some common mistakes. For example, where to place terrain. Obviously, we're going to show you some maps and some guidance which you can kind of copy, you know, with whatever terrain that you have in the most similar way, okay? So anyway, we are going to do lots more videos on terrain, but this is just a very basics guide to get you playing some, you know, getting your models on the table. So Michael, where do we start first? What's step number one?
So, step number one is you choose how big a game you're going to play.
Well, I want to play 2,000 points.
Great.
So that's what we're going to do?
That's what we're going to do. 2,000 points. We're then...
What other options do we have?
Well, we could play 500 points.
500, yep.
We could play 1,000 points.
Yep.
And we could play 1,500 points. In fact, we could play any number of points.
Okay.
If, say, you had maybe all the models in your collection, you wanted to use them, you could just play that many points.
The best thing to do is ask your opponent, hey, how many points do you have? And if they say, well, I've only got 1,500 points, play a 1,500 point game.
Yes.
Okay, don't say, oh, well, let's do 2,000 and you'll get some reserves. I mean, it gets a little bit... maybe unbalanced at that point. So always go with whoever has the least amount of points and just play that point style. There's always something to learn tactically. Even if you have less units, it makes you think a little bit harder, okay? So now there is a guide, obviously, depending on the amount of points that you want to use in terms of whether it's called an incursion mission or a strike force mission, okay? And you can see the specifics in the rule book as to what Games Workshop suggests you use for those point allocations. But we're going to go with a 2,000 point strike force mission, okay? And that's really important, so then that's going to kind of not only help us influence our list construction, but then also many other of these specifics later on throughout this video. So Michael, what's next then? So,
you and your opponent should write up an army list. Okay. Now, I'd recommend you don't tell each other what your army list is going to be until you show up and play. That will result in a more balanced, more interesting game. And try not to build your army list based on what your opponent is bringing. Because again, that will lead to a much more enjoyable experience for both of you. Now, we've chosen a strike force mission up to 2,000 points. Okay. So you'll write your list, and then that will determine how many maybe command points you start on.
And that's given you, obviously, if you look in whatever is the most recent edition of the chapter approved book, that will tell you exactly how many you start with. Now, the other thing to mention here is if we say 2,000, that doesn't mean I can take 2,001 points.
No.
I can take 1,970.
Yes.
And that's fine, but I can't go over that 2,000 mark, okay? No. Now, what Michael means by not telling your opponent is to, you know, what you're going to bring. Always have a little pre-game discussion, as we spoke about, as the type of game that you'd like to play. But aside from that, the most important thing is to not to what we call list tailor. So if I know Michael is bringing, I don't know, his Eldar, I don't want to then just take every unit I can think of that's really good at killing Eldar. I want to still take a very balanced list that I might take to a tournament that can, like a take-all-comers list. So whatever Michael chooses to bring, hopefully I've got an answer for it. And if I haven't, I'll reflect on that. That's great. Okay, cool. So we know what our list is. I know how many CPs I'm starting with because it tells me in the book. What's the next step?
So I will just add, if you are bringing a tournament army or something like that, do make it clear to your opponent what your aim is for that game. Because obviously if you're picking up a friendly game at maybe your local gaming store, tell your opponent whether you're going to bring a tournament army, just so you both have the same expectations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next, we've got to determine our mission.
Okay.
So for this, we'll look at we've got a table in our chapter approved, and there's a table for incursion and strike missions. So we're doing a strike force mission. We are going to roll 2 dice, one after the other.
Right, okay, I'll get a dice.
We'll roll the first dice. And we're rolling a D3.
Okay.
Now this isn't a 3-sided dice, guys. Obviously it's a 6-sided dice. We're just going to half the number, rounding up. So if you roll that dice for us, Steve.
Okay, I've rolled a 2.
We've rolled a 2. So A 2, a natural 2?
A natural
2.
A natural 2.
So we're going to half this, guys. That's going to be a 1.
Okay.
Okay, and then we're going to roll another dice.
Okay. I've rolled a 1.
Rolled a 1. So, 1, 1. We're going to play the mission that is 11.
Yep.
And that mission is recover the relics.
Well, I've got that right here. Recover the relics.
Excellent.
And you will have, by the way, we did that in one take. Anyway, so we'll also give you a download of all of these map packs. Okay, we've obviously laminated ours, but it gives you roughly the mission overview and just some ideas of where to place the terrain. Okay?
Yeah, because sometimes when you're setting up a game at a store, there might be this, you might spend 30 minutes trying to decide where all the terrain's going to go. So something like this is really, really useful just to get you started real quick. Yeah, and just to note, you will need to still pair this with the chapter approved book. Not all the specifics are on here. This is more our suggestions, is where you could place some terrain. Okay? Yeah. Okay, cool. So what's next? So next, both of you should read the mission specifics very carefully. Missions will usually have you have to hold a certain number of objectives. Maybe there'll be an extra mission, how to score more primary.
And we've got a lesson for you on each of these, okay? Yeah. So we've read through it. I'm really clear on how this mission works.
Excellent.
You're really clear.
Yeah.
What's the next step?
So the next step is to place all the objective markers on the mat.
First of all, we need a table, right?
You do need a table to play this game.
And for a Strike Force mission, that is a 60 by 44 mat or table. So we've got a nice mat here, which is 66 by 40.
60 by 40, yeah, and that is a recommendation, guys. You can play on bigger or smaller, but this is probably the best size designed for this points level of game.
So next up, let's place the objectives.
Okay.
We need 6. You set up 3, I'll set up 3 to make this faster. Now in the book, you'll notice that it encourages you to basically measure from the middle of the table. So you find the middle point. So if we're on a 60 by 44, then all we're going to do is just place a dice there and then 22 inches that way. So we've got 30 across, 22 down. That's going to give our middle point, and then you can typically work out the rest from that line.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the reason why Games Workshop do that is in case you play on a larger field.
Yes.
So if you're playing on a 6 foot by 4 foot table, at least then the objectives are still relatively close together and not spread out.
Yeah.
However, most people will find it much quicker once you know if you're playing on the exact size, which is a 60 by 44, what those measurements are from the edge.
Yeah.
And I sometimes write that in my book.
Yes.
Just to make it much, much quicker, because it's faster to measure from the edge. For example, on this one, the objectives need to be 22 from the side and then also 10 inches on. Okay, so something like that is much faster than trying to find the middle point and doing that over and over again. So we're going to set up the table and then we're going to go on to the next stage.
Yeah.
So the objectives are down. What's next?
So we've got to create the battlefield. And what that means is that we've got to set up terrain that we can fight over during the course of the game.
Yeah. Now this is really important. As you place the terrain down, there's a couple of things that you need to know. The first one is that you can never place terrain over an objective. It can be placed on if you're using these neoprene mats, it's fine to place it on the side of one, but you can never actually place it directly over that 40 mil objective marker itself. Okay,
yes.
So no piece of terrain can ever be placed on it. You always have to move it to one side.
Yeah.
Okay.
So traditionally, guys, you'll have a 40mm token to mark the center of the objective, and then if you're within 3 of it, you control it, as we've covered in other lessons. We've got these neoprene maps that mark out exactly where you can be to hold an objective.
Yeah. Now we've also given you a guide here as to where you could place terrain for a mission like this, and feel free to use that or discuss it with your opponent how you would like to do it. The most important thing is you both roughly have the same amount and equal in all types of ways.
Yeah.
Whether it's line of sight blocking, whether it's amount of dents or ruins, always try and create a fair and even table so that both armies, whether it's a gun line or combat, can both still fight.
Yes.
It doesn't want to be too heavily populated where a shooting army can't shoot anywhere, and not open enough that if you're a combat army, you're just going to get shot off the table. It's not going to lead to a nice experience for either of you, whether you win or lose. Okay, so we've decided on that. Now it's time to actually just get this terrain on the table. But as you do it, make sure you discuss it with your opponent.
Yep.
What keywords from the rule book you're going to allocate to those terrain if it's not obvious as to what they might have. Yep. Okay, so you do that during this stage. It's a nice, easy way of doing that. Okay, so we're going to put these containers down. Great bit of line of sight blocking straight down the middle of the table there. And we've got our set of terrain here as well that we're going to start putting out. So I'll give you a couple of ruins.
Yeah.
We've got our little trusty map here of where we're going to place some terrain. I've got like a nice piece over here. Now, again, you want to keep some nice gaps as well for models to move around. It's not always a great idea to have the terrain too bunched up so it stops, you know, armies from moving around. You want to make sure you've got nice elements for movement so that you can actually encourage all different types of models actually coming onto the table and gaps. So these pieces of terrain here, these don't really have a keyword. I reckon we give these obscuring keyword.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Gives your army a nice place to hide behind then.
Yeah, and it's really important, guys, that you think about where both armies have to deploy. So make sure that there is somewhere for someone to hide at least some of their army from any potential shooting in the first turn. Because a good game is one that lasts till battle round 5, and that's what we're aiming for.
Now these here, these don't really have a keyword either.
No.
But I reckon what we do is give them maybe light cover if you touch it.
Okay.
And also dense. So it gives a -1 to hit. Because we don't have any trees on the table, it might be good just to give that. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. It looks like a desert we've got here, so let's use that as our dense.
The next thing we're going to do is this stuff at the back, these kind of ruined pipes in, what do you reckon, a bit of difficult ground?
Difficult ground,
light cover?
Light cover, yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then obviously we've got our ruins, which are going to give light cover in those other elements. I'm just going to match it up to there. Okay, cool. So we've got a very even, as you can see, balanced table. And there's firing lanes, there's places to hide. So all in all, a good, fair game to be had here. Okay, so none of the terrain is on an objective. No, we're good there. So what's the next step?
So the next step is to roll off for attacker defender.
Let's do that then. Roll off to see who is attacker and defender. I'm on the red dice. You've also got a red dice. Here we go then. I've rolled a 3.
And I've rolled a 5.
Okay, so that means you get to what?
So I am the defender.
You're going to be the defender?
I am the defender.
And what does that mean?
So the defender picks their deployment zone.
Okay.
Which means, of course, now we need to measure out our deployment zones.
Okay, cool. And that is 18 inches?
So that is 12 inches from the centre line. Okay, and this, we've got our little guide here. So we are 12 inches from the centre line, and we've divided the board from the short board edges.
Short edge, yeah. So this is going to be mine. So it's either 12 inches from the middle, which also gives us 18 inches from the edge. Okay, cool. So I will take this side, you're on that side.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What's the next?
So next, we have to choose our secondaries.
Secondary picks. Well, I know what I'm taking.
I know what I'm taking.
Cool. So we're going to pick those secondaries. Now, really, really crucial to this, we will have a lesson exactly on how to do this a little bit more specifically. But the key things to note is when you get to this stage, do not blurt out straight away.
No.
Give your opponent time to think, let them choose, and secretly write yours down. Whether it's on your phone, whether it's on your iPad or a notebook, write them down. When I'm happy with mine, I would say, okay, cool, I've decided, let me know when you're finished and you're decided.
Yeah.
What you don't want to do is say, okay, cool, so I'm going to take Assassinate and I'm going to take this, and you're thinking, oh, well, if he's taking that, then I might change mine and I might go for something else. Don't do that, write it down secretly. Okay, and then you would both say, okay, have you written yours down? Yes. You would say yes. I would say, cool, I've written mine down, which ones are you going for? And we can basically kind of both show each other at the same time.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Okay, next up then.
So next up, we have to declare reserves and units that are embarked within transports.
Cool. Who do we start with?
So we start with neither of us. This, like secondaries, is secret.
Okay, cool. All right.
So again, you might write this down secretly, shorthand it. I have written mine down.
Okay. I've written mine down.
All right. So I'll reveal mine first then.
Okay.
So I have a unit that I'm going to spend a command point to put in strategic reserves.
Okay.
Okay. So this is a stratagem in the core rulebook, and we will cover this more in our deployment session, but essentially this unit starts off the table and can come on a board edge later in the game.
Nice. Okay, I am going to put a unit in Deep Strike.
Okay.
As they have that inbuilt ability, so it doesn't cost me any CPs. And then I'm also going to place my aggressors in a transport.
Okay.
In the one transport that I have. Okay.
All right.
Cool.
Excellent.
So transports, reserves. Okay, cool. I feel like I know what's coming next, but just tell us, what is it?
So it's deploying your army.
Okay, and who do we start with?
We start with the defender, and then we alternate a unit at a time. So I would place a unit down, and then you would place a unit.
My unit in a transport, though, does that count as 1 or 2 units?
So any unit that you've declared is in reserve or in a transport, you will not set up during the deployment step.
Cool.
So your transport will set up, and the unit, you don't worry about them, they're in the transport.
Beautiful. All right, cool. So we start off with you.
Yep.
You're the defender.
So I'm just going to place a unit on the table.
Cool.
I'm going to place this tank over here.
And you have to deploy this in your deployment zone unless they have a special ability like mine, which says I can deploy anywhere on the table, but more than 9 inches away from your deployment zone, or 9 inches away from any of your units.
Yes.
So I'm just going to stick these guys over here.
Cool.
Just like that, which is then 9 inches away from your deployment zone. Okay?
Perfect. And we'll keep going and alternating deploying our units, guys. So I'll stick this guy down here.
I'll put a unit on my back foot objective.
We'll put this fella over here.
And all I've got left is my big tank.
And then I've got this last unit. So you may find, guys, that one person has to deploy more units than the other. Now, if you run out of units to deploy, your opponent just continues to deploy the rest of their army.
So I would say, I'm all done, you now go. Yep.
Now I'm just going to put these little guys over here.
Nice. And again, we'll have more videos on how to deploy more specifically. We're just throwing these down to show you through the stages.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So our armies are now deployed. What is the next stage?
So the next stage is to determine who's going to go first.
Oh, okay, cool.
So we're both going to roll a dice.
Yep. Okay. You've rolled a 4 and I've rolled a 2. So you're going to be going first, or can you choose?
So you can't choose.
You can't choose.
You can't choose. So I have to go first.
Because you rolled more than me?
Because I rolled more than you.
Okay, cool.
Right, but just before you start playing the game, some units or armies may have abilities.
Yeah.
Okay, and these might allow you to redeploy units or maybe move units at the start of the game. And you will alternate doing these, using these abilities, starting with the person who's going first.
You.
Me.
Now, it's really good, really key on your, if you need a cheat sheet, just write down all those units or stratagems that you have access to at this stage, okay? Cool. So you're going to start, and you've got a unit that can pre-game move, right?
Yes, so these crew here, they can move before the game begins. So we're just going to move forward. And each ability will specify how far you can move, or where you can redeploy, or what you can redeploy.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Now, I've got a stratagem I can use which allows me to redeploy. Now, I don't want these guys stood out in the open right here, so I'm going to redeploy them just behind this wall, keep them nice and safe, and I think I can redeploy 3 units, so I'm just going to tuck those in a little bit just to make sure you can't shoot them, okay? And then I can move on to the objective in a moment. So I'm just going to basically hide my army. That's my redeployment done. Have you got any others?
Yes, so I have one more sort of move before the game,
okay.
Which is just going to be this tank here.
Cool. Nice.
Right, now, armies do sometimes have special abilities, maybe a faction-specific rule that they do have to declare after you roll to see who goes first. So for the Tau, we have to declare a sort of attitude towards combat between Montcar and Cao Yon.
And with my Space Marines, it's already set for me, so that's already what I start with.
Yeah, so
cool.
I've declared Montcar, and that has granted this tank the ability to move forward.
Okay, awesome. What's next?
So next, we begin the battle.
Right. Well, Michael, best of luck. Let's have a good game.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, I hope this is just a nice, easy way of showing you exactly all those different steps and some of those top tips. Okay, so make sure, as the recap, make sure you agree with your opponent the size of the battle that you would like to play. Do not list tailor. Okay, just take a well-balanced army list to your games. When you're placing your objectives and everything else, make sure your measurements are key and correct from the center of the table if you're using a larger table, and if you know what the math is from the edges, feel free to use that. When you're dividing up the terrain, make sure it's even, make sure both combat and shooting armies can have a good, fair, balanced game, and also make sure you do not place those the terrain pieces on those objectives. When you come to picking your secondaries, do it secretly and then reveal together. And then also when you come to resolving those pre-game abilities, make sure you alternate starting with the player who's going first.
Yes. And with the terrain, just make sure everybody's absolutely clear on all of the keywords available and where you're measuring to and from, whether you can see through any windows, etc. Because we want that for a fair and balanced game.
Absolutely. Just as a sort of side of things, if in doubt, always go with a little bit heavier terrain than lighter.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to get shot off the table turn one. It's not fun for anybody. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.